All right, guys, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to cover how to recreate a VM after it's been an encrypted VM after it's been restored from Azure Recovery Service. To save time, I've done a few steps that should have been covered by something else, or you should have already had that. I created a VM called disk-e-vm1, configured the backup, initiated a backup, and now I also did a restore. So now I have a restore disk from backup. Now the restore process with Azure Recovery Service, it's actually getting better. Um, so when you do a restore of an encrypted disk, it does give you all the information you require to get that VM up and running again. For example, restore the disk tells you this is the storage account where restored to, and it's going to give you two JSON files. The one is for the blob configuration, and the other one is for the encryption information, and also gives you the URL for the storage account itself. Now, to get started, what I'm going to do is jump into that storage account and review the information of the JSON files. So I go to my storage account. This is the storage account where it restored the VHD to. And I'll go into the blob section. Then this was the container mentioned in the restore process. Okay, so these are the three files that the restore process restored: the VHD, the config, and then the encryption information. I'm going to go ahead and download this one's first. Let's see what it has. A download. I'll just open. All right. Once that comes up, I'll jump again and download the other file for the encryption settings. Then I'll briefly explain the content of the file. Okay, so the first file, which is the config file, the blob config file, this actually gets information from the information of the file. I think this is still a work in progress because some of the information are still blank, like the VM license type, um, the name here, and this is information you need to recreate the VM, but they're still blank for now. But you do have enough information to successfully recreate an encrypted VM. Next here is the encryption file. Now, this section, you only need to use this config file if you have actually deleted the secrets or the key from the key vault. So if you deleted the secrets or the key from the key vault, then you need to ingest this information into Azure um, Key Vault so that you can then be able to decrypt the VM. There is an article. Is it this article here? I'll include this article with the video. This article actually goes through the step on how to extract that information from the encryption file and put it back into the key vault so you can decrypt, unlock VM upon boot. But since I already have the entries in the key vault, I am just going to ignore that section and this article for now, but I'll share it in the posting. Okay, now I'm going to recover the VM since I have all the information, and this is the step I'm going to use. This is the article, the step in the article. to restore. And there are multiple ways depending on whether you want to restore, recreate the VM as a managed disk or unmanaged disk, whether the VM was encrypted with Beck or Beck and Keck. This one gives you all the information. My VM was encrypted with Beck and Keck, so the process I'm going to follow is down here. This is the process I'm going to follow, right? This process would work for you, but in my case, I do have a template that I normally use, which is a little bit simpler for me. So I am gonna bring that up, and I would use that to recreate my VM. So I'll jump back into Visual Studio Code, and I'll create a new file, and I'll change this to PowerShell. Once I have that, I'll paste my code. And then my template does require a few information to recreate the VM. For example, it needs the subscription ID and all that stuff. So I can get all that information from the config file here. The subscription ID is not outright, but I can get it from all my resource IDs. VM name. Now, in my case, I'll just show you briefly. Um, in my case here, I still have the VM running. I'm going to change the name a bit because I do have the VM running. And I'm going to make, say, VM1 restore. And just because I have that VM running, what I also need to do is to make sure I create a new NIC because I need a NIC to attach that VM to. So I'm going to briefly run over here in the portal. Network interface. Add a new NIC. VM restore 1 NIC. And I'm just going to assign it to the same NSG as the original VM. And I'm going to put it in an existing resource group. Say create. All right, and once that's created, before I leave this section, I'm also just going to give it uh, a public IP so I can actually connect to it when the time comes. All right, so while that is saving, I'll jump back into my template here, and I'll say the nickname. and I see, right? And I can continue. For the VM size, you can get the size of the VM from here. This is the original size, but the standard BS size they take too long to boot because of the shared CPU. So I'm just gonna go ahead and give it a bigger size just to make sure it boots up okay. Let me see an example of a size here. I don't have all the SKUs in my head, so normally I just like to get an example. I'm gonna give it this one. And then doesn't require space. I'll take this one here. All right. And the RG name you can also get from here, from the resource ID. Where is it? Location is also in here down below. And OS this name, you can give it a name. You'd have to create a name for it. Oops. And OS VHD URI, it's also here. This is it. Now, while I'm copying this, things to point out, if I had actually deleted the VM, I would have used this nickname here to put it in there to create my VM. But just because I still have this nick in use, that's why I didn't use that. That's an FYI. So I'll go ahead and put this up there. Yep. And the other things that are stated here, normally they should be filled out if there was an availability set. So there's no availability set here. The license type. This one I don't think it's populated yet because I do have licenses. So I'm going to use the hybrid use benefit. So I'm just going to take out this one here for the license type. So once I've filled up all these parameters, let's also comment you out because there's no availability set. And once I fill out all these parameters, the last parameters needed is this section here, which is to encrypt to connect to the key vault. Those information are here. Uh, so I'll go ahead and copy this out. This is a secret URL. Then I need the disk encryption key vault ID, which is this. Then I need the key encryption key URL. Mouthful. Then I also need the key encryption key vault ID. Now, in most cases, these two are the same, but sometimes they're not. So I'm going to copy it directly from in here, just so that in case yours is different, you know where to find it. Okay. So once I have that information in there, uh, my script should be complete. Now I just need to run it. So let me just go ahead. This is ISC. Let me add a PowerShell. One second, and let me drop down to PowerShell, and I will connect. This section is a custom module that I use, so don't worry about it. Normally, you will connect like you normally do to your subscription using the login Azure RM or the connect-Azure RM. So once I have connected, I'll start running my commands. I'll highlight them and run them in sections. Oops. So used to ISC. Let me just copy this out and then run that in there. I'm already logged in, so I'm not going to log in. Okay. And once that's in there, let's see what we got. And let's run this other section. Okay. I like running them section by section, so that just in case something is off, I can fix as I go along. Okay. All right. Once all that is good, I can now create my VM. All right. Once this script is running here, I can briefly just go over information in my template. If you look here, so here I'm setting the variables. These are all the variables I got from the config file, right? Then you can log in, set the subscription, set the VM config, set the nick to use the existing nick that we created, right? Down here is where it actually gets a little bit confusing. This line 29, what I'm doing here is that I am creating a managed disk using information from this variable here, and this variable holds the information for the VHD that was actually restored. So I'm creating a new managed disk from the restored VHD, and here I am I'm attaching that to the VM config as an OS disk, and I am setting up the keys to be able to unlock this upon boot. Once I have that in the VM variable, and I can then create a new VM from that VM variable. And that is the process. Let's just give it a few minutes for this VM to create, and we will continue. All right, so it should take the normal time that it takes for create a VM, about 5 to 10 minutes, and you should get an OK here. If I jump back to the portal and refresh my VM list, I should have the restored VM. Let's go into that VM. Okay, this is the size we provided, and the VM is running. Let's just check on the boot diagnostics to make sure it's up before we try to connect. Most times when you restore a VM, sometimes it might get stuck on getting device ready. Okay, so you want to confirm the VM is up. So once the VM is up, let's go ahead, try to connect to it now, just to confirm that we can log in. Oh, and if you check the disk here, we should have encryption enabled. So let's just check that before we go. Encryption enabled, perfect. And overview, connect. All right, for the username, it's going to be the same username for the existing uh, for the VM because it's just a restore. So the username for that VM was and password. And as you can see, it connected me successfully into uh, the virtual machine that we just restored. If you go into the File Explorer, you can see that the C drive is encrypted, just like it was before it was backed up. Now that's how you create a VM from a restored encrypted VHD that was restored on Azure uh, recovery services. All right, thank you for your time. Hope this video was informative.